Howdy Moz fans, and welcome to another edition of Whiteboard Friday. This week I'm going to take a stance. It's a little bit of a strong and contrarian stance. I'm going to say that I really dislike most infographics. In fact, not even most. The vast majority of infographics I strongly dislike. And that said, I really like visual assets. And today I'm going to try and explain the difference to you and show you why I'm a huge believer in one and such a disrespecter of the other. So the typical infographic, and the thing that frustrates me about it so much, is that it's really designed primarily to get embeds, to get links, potentially to get some traffic and build some branding, but it's actually not optimized for a lot of these things. In fact, because the medium has both become so overused and because the execution on many of them is such poor quality, I find that they often hurt more than they help. And because of that, I'm not a fan. So here's your typical infographic. How obsessed are Facebook users with celebrities? Oh my gosh, look, 35% have liked a celebrity's page, and look, more and more people have liked more and more celebrity pages over time. And here's a picture of some people, and here's a words in some graphic format that's really hard to read, and unnecessary illustrations on the side just to ornament this thing up. And then they hope, right, that someone's going to pick it up and embed it on their news site. And occasionally this stuff does work. And in fact, for a few years now, it has worked. The challenge is it keeps going down and down and down. It's reaching a point of diminishing returns. And I think that's because audiences are really tired of the infographic format, are getting very tired, especially more sophisticated and savvy audiences, which for a lot of B2B and even many B2C marketers, let's face it, we're reaching those areas. And also, these things can be tremendously burdensome to try and put on a web page. They're hard to read a lot of the time, so it makes it challenging even when someone does embed it. Google has said specifically that they're trying to take they're looking at algorithmic ways that they can work around infographics that get embedded that people didn't really mean to or intend to link back, and they were merely doing a link to the infographic because of the embed itself. This kind of stuff, I'm just not about that, right? And I don't think that most of us in the inbound marketing field should be about that, despite the potentially positive impact that something very similar can have. So these are visual assets. And there are many different kinds of visual assets. In fact, I would say infographics, traditional infographics, are just one type of visual asset, and possibly not the best one. In fact, probably not the best one, in my opinion. Photos, right? Just a collection of pictures from relevant and interesting people, events, places, even concepts that are illustrated. These get picked up, they get shared around the web. They're useful for social media networks, but they're also useful to have in a photo library that people might take and use for all kinds of different reasons. Charts and graphs that illustrate or explain the numbers behind a story or a phenomenon. These can be incredibly useful, and they get picked up and used all the time by sources that want to quote the numbers, but even by sources that originated the numbers that are looking for visual ways to represent them. This is a phenomenal way to build value through visual assets. Visual representations. I do stuff like this all the time, right? Think of the SEO pyramid, right? It starts at the base with sort of accessibility, and then we talk about keywords and links and social and user and usage signals and all that kind of stuff. I've done some visuals like that on Whiteboard Friday, right? Things like the ranking factors, right? Distribution through the pie chart, explaining those different things. I've done stuff like the T-shaped web marketer, right? Talking about going deep in a particular niche, but having a lot of cross-domain expertise. And these are not high-quality graphics, right? They're made by me in, I use Flash, literally, like Flash 6 to make these things, because I learned Flash way back in my days of a web designer, and I'm lazy and have not learned to get good at Illustrator or Photoshop in particular. And yet, they get picked up and sent all over the place. And you can see visual examples, visual assets doing the same thing in all sorts of niches. Comics, illustrations, or storyboards that tell a narrative visually. Incredibly popular, get picked up all the time. Screenshots, even just a simple screenshot with some annotation and explanation, examples of what to do, how to use it, how to interpret that information, layering on top some data. These types of visual assets have huge cachet and value, and you get a lot more opportunity from these kinds of visual assets, in my opinion and experience, for links, for referencing, being referenced by media outlets, by industry resources, by third parties, by people in your professional or personal sphere. You have more of an opportunity for embeds because they're much simpler to embed, and they can be useful in so many more places than an infographic, which really needs to take up an entire post about it if it's going to get referenced at all. They give a lot more value to people. They're simple to consume, to understand, and they're useful and usable in ways that infographics often are not. And a lot of the time, they're far simpler to execute. It doesn't take a graphic designer to produce a ton of these different types of resources, and it often doesn't cost very much, if anything at all, to make them. And that means that you can produce a far greater quantity of visual assets than you could of infographics, and have potential there to get links, to get references, to build your brand in really authentic ways. So I'm sure there will be some vigorous debate and discussion in the comments, and I look forward to it. And we'll see you again next week for another edition of Whiteboard Friday. Take care.